So, thinking through what makes sense here is, if your most important objective is to have students use perfect APA formatting, then Packback might not be the perfect place for that. But if your objective is to have students do more high quality research or support them writing, including evidence, using strong sources, or if you really want them to participate in class, pieces like that, it's going to be a great fit. And that's what I want to walk through is what assignments do make sense and how can you utilize the full platform so that your students are getting the most value out of how to use it. So before I jump in here, because I'm going to walk through several different types of assignments, I do just want to open a little poll to see what are you really hoping to get out of using Packback or from coming to this one. So let me go ahead. I'm just going to launch this poll and give you a few seconds to fill it out. And really, my goal here will be to make sure I spend time where you're interested, or make sure that I'm skimming over things that you're not as interested in. Awesome. Oh, perfect. Excellent. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll here. It looks like it's mostly filled out. And really looks like what people are looking for is how do I fully utilize all the tools for my assignment? And also maybe an assignment I haven't tried in. And then really looking at research papers and those long form writing. So I'll make sure to try to spend the most time on those. So as I start out, before I kind of jump into each of the individual assignments, what I want to do is start with just our pedagogical foundation and really think through what I'm going to talk through is I'm talking through the best way to utilize the full platform for the assignments. So one big thing that we talk a lot about at Packback is self-determination theory, making sure that all of those pieces, that student choice, the mastery-based feedback, and the connection to purpose are all really aligned as students are going through assignments. And that obviously doesn't come in one day. They can be thoughtfully planned out throughout the semester or throughout each different assignment. And the roadblock, I always ran into when I was teaching, and even sometimes outside of the classroom, is it can be really hard to allow autonomy or build that confidence towards mastery for students without that trust that they can do it. And that's really where the scaffolding comes in. So what we're thinking about here is, as I'm talking through these different assignments, I'll be talking a lot about how are we scaffolding so that they can get to those, strong research papers or those stronger long form writing assignments. But also they feel confident and they're excited and they have some time in that as well. So with Packback, what you see is each of the pieces of Packback can allow for your overall objective of the courses through that scaffolding piece. And think of it as the steps for success for really any course and any assignment. So for example, you might be using Packback questions as a way to allow for further discussion outside of class, but haven't necessarily thought through how does that build into a term paper that they could be doing? Or maybe you've only used Packback deep dives for a unit writing assignment, but haven't really thought about how the discussion portion could build into a longer term writing assignment. So that's what we'll be walking through. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into long form writing assignments here. So they're called all different names. People might call them an end of term summative review or a comprehensive paper or a synthesis paper, all different names for really a lot of the same types of things, which is a longer form writing paper that has students synthesizing their information and applying it in their writing. Feel free to throw in the chat here. Is this something that you already do? Is this something that you're looking to try? And what's really been helpful, or what has really stopped you from doing this if you haven't done it just yet? And then I'm going to go ahead and jump through, what does this look like on Packback? How would I break it down for the different parts of our platform? And then I'll go through an example of what it also looks like from a community that we've actually seen it in. So as I've already mentioned, scaffolding is essential. It really helps build up the students. And what you want to do is set them up for strong weekly or biweekly practice, be able to gauge their progress, and then allow them to excel in that final paper. So when I think of that, looking at our questions platform here, what you would have them do is prepare for their paper. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. One way is to make sure that they feel confident in the weekly topics that you're going through. What are they currently talking through in class? What are the things that you want them to be able to discuss? This also drives into that autonomy piece. Students getting to talk through their purpose and what excites them, and then also being able to have some drive over that discussion by asking really good questions about what they're learning about within class. So it could be that what you're having them here is just talking about what's in class. It could also be that you're encouraging students to discuss different topics that they want for their paper. It could be something along those lines. So both pieces here really could be valuable, where you have them discussing content, or you have them preparing for that end of term paper or more of a summative assignment that you're looking for. And then the way we've seen professors use polls here is really to help guide discussion for upcoming weeks. So you could gauge what part of that assignment are they feeling the least confident in? Where do they need some more support? Or maybe it's the part that they feel the most confident in. So you can see, hey, they're really strong here. I actually don't need to spend that much time giving them tools or resources. They feel great about writing a thesis statement. They don't feel so strong about supporting evidence. And then we dive into that deep dive assignment. So using deep dives for students to submit their long form writing and then getting it graded with the instructor lens on it, really thinking through, what do you want to see when they have that assignment? And some tips I would have here that we've seen from instructors. One is having a really strong rubric that lays out for students, what do you expect to see? Submitting, of course, their final paper. And then also you can use it to help them submit drafts. So using this as a way that they can see, here's what my draft is, here's some feedback that you've given them, or here's a draft, here's, run one, no research, let me go into the next part, final draft, it'll include all of my research. However, that makes sense based on what you're looking for from your students. So as promised, I'm going to hop in here into an example of what we've seen this. And something I really enjoy about this example is this professor has students practicing their writing in both the questions portion and in the deep dives. So they have a draft here. So I'll go into just an example of what they have as an assignment here. So the instructor lays out, put your draft in 550 words and gives them some more instructions. They throw their drafts in, and they're actually getting peer-to-peer feedback on the writing. So when I scroll down here, this student gave some great feedback of, don't write in first person. And also, I would include a well-defined thesis statement. So giving their peers that feedback before you necessarily even have to put your eyes on it. They're getting a soft launch, they're getting the comfort of growth and potential, I wouldn't call it failure, but areas of growth here by getting those drafts and getting the peer-to-peer feedback, which will also allow you to get that higher level of writing when you go into the actual deep dive assignment. So if I click here, you can see that this instructor has then their writing assignments thrown into here. So not only are students getting feedback from peers for what they're writing and how they're writing, the students are also getting feedback within Packback on their grammar, their flow and structure, their, some of the research they're doing and different pieces like that. So that when you go to grade, you're getting a much more refined piece of work off the bat. So that's how this instructor does it. I think this is a really good example of how you can interact with both the questions, so giving those drafts, peer feedback, and then also that final assessment and feedback from the instructor lens there. Now, I want to just pivot this right into talking about our research papers. So their research papers are really great to use on Packback, but this always comes with kind of that piece I talked about in the beginning of when we should or shouldn't use assignment on Packback. So great things for research papers. We talked a little bit here about giving students feedback. That can be really helpful within Packback. What we also see here is that we have a really great space for students to get their writing feedback as they're going through writing. However, if your goal is, fully, I want my student to use perfect APA writing and that they need a specific title page and they need their inline citations to look a certain way, they can do that on Packback. Our AI isn't going to guide them to have page breaks. So that's just one piece I want to call out before doing this so that nobody gets on to a deep dive. You're like, oh, this is great. My students are getting great feedback and they're doing a great job with their grammar and their writing and they're giving their peer-to-peer feedback. But at the end of the day, I didn't know, and that's usually 75% of the grade or 50% of the grade is their APA formatting. I will say that we've seen it work really, really well, particularly if students have a great rubric, a really strong way to see what are they expected to complete in their final paper. So I'm just going to pull up here a brief example of a way an instructor does their research paper on here. And what you'll notice is the way they break this out for students. They have a proposal, they have a first draft, they have a test paper they do, they have a final paper proposal, context, and then they also have, I think they have 2 first drafts on here. So that's a way that the instructor breaks it up. And then in this particular case, this instructor actually has them turn in their final outside of Packback. So they put in their drafts, their context papers, their proposals, all of those pieces on Packback so that they're getting all that support as they're writing, they're getting that AI guidance. And then their final is given, this professor does paper hand in. They like to grade pen and paper. So that's the way you could do it. You could also have them submit it another way, or you could submit it on here and grade right within Packback. I'm going to keep hopping in here, but want to see if there's any other questions. I see that Pete and Kat are in the chat as well, ready to answer any questions. And they're very excited and very, very good. They're working for a while with instructors. So if you have a question, feel free to throw it in the questions and answers or put it into the chat and we can definitely talk through that. All right, I'm going to hop into case studies here. This is one of our most popular ways to use Packback, especially when we rolled out deep dives. Case studies were like our number one, I think, things and ways that instructors used Packback. It's just a very exciting place to be able to tie everything together. So what you'll see when thinking about case studies is we see the most success when instructors use Packback, the questions area, as a way for students to explore what they're really curious about learning, the information that's being covered in class, and tying it back to their personal experiences, tying it really back into that material, digging deeper into the material, and then saving that deep dive portion of Packback for the specific topic or the specific case study where you actually don't want all the students reading each other's full case studies because you want them to be individual and you want to give them that individual feedback. What I would also say here is when you're doing a case study on deep dives, you really want to include strong guiding questions so that students know in order for me to have a successful case study response, these are the questions I definitely need to answer. If I haven't answered those, I probably haven't done a thorough enough job within the case study. We've also seen students use these case studies as, or professors use case studies as a way to like break it up. So they might have a longer case study where they just do different portions broken up so that that's depending on the scaffolding for students. If it's their first time doing a case study, that could be a really good way to start them off. Awesome. And then let me pop in here to an example. So what you see here in this class is each unit, they have a different Packback assignment. And in these Packback assignments, the students are coming up with the questions. They're asking open-ended questions. They're getting that coaching as they're asking questions with that feedback that they get as they write. And then they also are able to respond to peers. So something you'll also notice when you're doing Packback questions, if you're an old pro at this, I'm speaking to the choir, you already know this, but if you're newer to Packback questions, the other benefit of having this is that students are really then reading multiple responses. They're looking for what they're interested in responding to and the questions that really excite them, but they're also getting a lot more reading in because they need to read the question in order to be able to have a strong response. So there is kind of that twofold piece here. And then, like I said in this example, what they're really focusing on is the content here. And when they go into their deep dives, this is where they have their case discussion or their case study. So I can pull up just an example of what a submission looks like here when they submit their assignment. So this is just, what that looks like within their case study. And then Professor just gave some light feedback. You can also give as much or as little feedback as you want. We generally recommend on Packback questions that you let it run. I wouldn't call it set it and forget it, but set it and check in on it, once a week and give one piece of praise or a couple pieces of praise. Whereas on deep dives, you'll want to go in and use your rubric to read through. Our AI grading will give the grading on some of those red pen writing pieces, like the grammar, some of the flow and structure, word count, things like that. And I'm going to pause real quick before I hop into another assignment because I do see a great question here. Can Packback be used for research papers and grant proposals? We have seen research papers and grant proposals on Packback, especially with grant proposals. Something that I've seen be really powerful is in the questions portion. That's where students are coming up with their ideas. So like, hey, I was thinking about this topic. Here's some of the preliminary research I did. What do you think? Do you build off of each other? They're having that back and forth discussion. And then when they go into deep dives, that's where they're writing out, their grant proposal or a draft of a grant proposal, getting feedback and improving it, maybe breaking it into smaller pieces. Like, here's the why, here's the topic I'm choosing and why. And if you want to give them that approval, that's a great topic. That's not a great topic. Or if you want to leave that open for them to get that peer feedback, that's a great way to do it too. But usually what I see with grant proposals is a breakdown within the deep dives. Sorry, excuse me. Let's jump in here for this next assignment. And hopefully that answers your question, Susan. But I would also say grant proposals is one of the things that has always been my favorite when I see them on there, because it's just so exciting what students come up to with grant proposals. They're generally, from my experience, they're excited when they get to interact with their peers about it and have kind of that peer review and conversation. But also they seem to be really passionate about it when they get to do those proposals. Great. Well, I'm going to jump into lab assignments here. This is one where I think lab assignments can be a really broad term at times because different courses have different types of labs. So when I'm talking about labs, there's really two I'll cover here. One is that the more technical lab, so intro chemistry course, lab course, and the other is a field lab. So both of those can be done on Packback. We have both of them on Packback. All types. There's probably a lot more that I'm even describing there. I'm going to focus on those two, but just know that really a lot of different types of lab assignments work on Packback here. Excuse me. Okay, so when thinking of lab assignments, you're going to start to notice a theme here. I've probably said it a few times now, but it's really this concept of breaking pieces down, allowing students to have the scaffolding up to a larger work, a larger paper, and also getting some of that autonomy and purpose. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Just trying to kick this cough I got from daycare. So thanks for bearing with me. Sorry for coughing in your ear. All right. So first piece here is using that weekly discussion to facilitate conversation about the deeper principles. Again, this goes back to a lecture. Maybe this goes back to reading over a lab assignment before you're doing it and coming up with some pre-questions, some pre-information about the lab to prepare. During using polling as a knowledge check, what concepts are making sense? So a lot of times, I know when you're doing labs, there are things that are just right and wrong, and you need to make sure that students understand that before they jump into the lab. So polling is a great way to do that. Even if it's a homework poll where you're saying, here are your options, explain why. Homework polls have always been my favorite polls because you really get this chance for students to explain their reasoning as they're completing a poll. And then the last piece is submitting labs within the deep dives. Again, you're going to want to include strong guiding questions. What do you expect to be completed? And then also have that really clear rubric within the deep dive so that students know this is what's expected of me. And frankly, just makes your grading a lot easier, especially with a lab assignment. If you have a breakdown of these are the different things I'm looking at as I'm going through the lab. So I'm actually going to show two examples here. One is going to be of a lab, and the second one's going to be of a great rubric that's been used for our lab. So you'll see here that this is how this instructor broke it down. You have assignments 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5 through 7, and they really talk about how to visualize data and the description of the data. They give lots of details, and when I click into this assignment, they have questions to answer and an expectation here of how many words they want and what they're looking for. And now what I want to just look at is more of an in-depth look at the rubric. So we've done another webinar last week on rubric writing. So if you want just some insight on the basics of rubric writing and some hot tips there, feel free to go check out that webinar. But I wanted to pull this example up because you can imagine how much easier grading is when you have this clearly set out. So, okay, I'm going to look at the title page. Check. They checked off the boxes or they didn't. Makes it really clear for you, and it also makes it clear for the students why they lost points on these pieces. Same for the abstract. Introduction, procedures, data results, and discussion. Conclusion. So when I went into a submission here, I can see, this student, this is what they're calling their title page, their abstract, purpose, background. And then you can also see there's some formulas in here, and then they have their citations. So that's what that lab looks like. I think also when you're thinking of research papers, occasionally this also ties into that. This is how you break it down, and you could add your citations on the bottom. We also have a references tab that you can use there as well. I'm going to add in some caveats for labs, because when I think of labs, a lot of times there are like specific technical language when you're in different courses. So a chemistry course, there might be a certain words or language that general grammar checks don't pick up, or they pick up and they give feedback on. So here's what I would recommend when you're doing a lab on Packback, if you think this could affect you or your students. First, and this is probably good for any time students are using any type of AI, is reminding them that it's a tool, it's not a judge. So just like Word or Google Docs, our grammar checker is not going to necessarily recognize technical language, and it may mark something as misspelled, but it's not misspelled because this is really a technical word that we wouldn't know. There were some formulas in there. There's no way that we know that that is not technically a correct formula, which we also don't want to say that we need that, because we are not content experts over here. We want the instructor to be the content expert. We want the students to work towards being those content experts as well. You'll also notice that our flow instructor, the general guidance, is it'll tell students, hey, that paragraph's pretty short. You want to expand on your thoughts, have more sentences to your paragraph. Well, if you're an instructor who wants them to have just the thesis at the top and it's only one sentence or two sentences, then that feedback wouldn't necessarily be relevant to them. So with that, remind students that using AI with wisdom is part of the learning process. You should use AI, it's helpful, but also you still need to use what you know about your course and about the content as well. So just a small caveat for the labs there. It hasn't been a huge issue, but it is something that I've noticed a couple times where we want to make sure instructors know if it's a technical language, it's just like any other. Our grammar checker is similar to other tools where the grammar piece is going to correct that. My name gets corrected every time. It hasn't picked up on it just yet. All right, just a couple more here. The next thing I want to go through is reflections. So when I think of reflections here, this could be a personal reflection, or it could be a summary and takeaway from a reading or lecture. So professors do this a little bit differently. I consider reflections, the way you treat reflections will also be the same as a short essay or anything, in those kind of realms there. So first thing, we have professors who do reflections kind of in two ways. One is that they do all their weekly reflections in Packback questions. So this is where they're allowing students, they want students to reflect and discuss with each other. Um, you'll think of this as a way for students to get a peer-to-peer feedback. If it's a discussion that you want to have an eagle eye on, but you don't actually feel like the need to go in and give individual feedback for everything because they're having a great discussion. You just want to be in the know of some of the overarching themes here. Students may also not know much about the subject, so using this can really help allow them to discuss what they're thinking of the conversation. With polls, this is where I think it's really, really helpful when you're doing reflections and having that open-ended conversation because it could jump off the rails. It's one of those things where it's wonderful. Students are getting autonomy. They're getting connected to their purpose. They're building mastery. But if they start to have a really good time, reflections can start going all different directions. Polls is a really good place to guide students back to what you find really important, what you want them to refocus on. But you're doing it in a way that doesn't feel too heavy-handed. You're getting them excited by doing the poll, allowing them to talk through a few different subjects. So they're still getting that choice, but you're guiding them through what are the options here. And then the last piece is submitting reflections, regular reflections on deep dives. So this is where you'll see that summative assignment come back up. Maybe they've been doing short reflections with peers all throughout the semester, but now what they're doing is really looking at an end of a semester reflection. What did I pick up from the entire semester? It could also be something that you're doing weekly, and you don't want, this is a sensitive topic, and you don't want students to feel the need to share publicly. You do want them to be able to share privately, and you want to be able to read through their reflections and give them feedback there. So I'm going to pull up this example here. And this class is a Smart Machines and Human Prospects course. And in each week, they're actually watching videos, listening to TED Talks, doing podcasts, reading through different pieces. And that's what their questions are. They're getting to have these reflections, those weekly reflections on what they find interesting about what they listened to or they read, really diving into that part. But then the instructor, at the end of the day, wanted them to come back and have a final reflection on smart machines and human prospects. So for their assignment here, what they have is, must we humans bother to create wealth, fight wars, work, worry if AI can do it for us? So that's really one of the things that I think is great is, okay, they've gotten to have all this fun and talk through all these different topics throughout the semester. Now the professor's like, let me see what you've learned. Based on all those reflections, how do we pull it all together to this overall objective theme of the course? And that's really what you want to do, right? Is build this piece up of kind of starting with letting them have these smaller questions, getting feedback, and interacting, discussing with peers, so that when they are doing a final assessment, an assessment that you need to grade, it's at a higher quality because they've had lots of writing practice, they've gotten peer feedback, they've had peer discussions, and now they're coming in with that final piece that you get to put the final spin on there. I did want to show one more example of this because I think this is another example of a great reflection assignment that a professor does. They actually give several options. So they give 10 options of writing, and students get to pick which ones they want to do. And they have, in this case, halfway through the semester to pick, 5 assignments out of the 10, or I can't remember how many it is. Let's say 5 out of the 10, and the students get to pick which ones they want to write. So you could set it up that way. That one is a little bit harder to grade, and that student responses are in different spots, but it is a great way for students to be able to see they get some choice here, and they're still reflecting on topics the professor's really excited about. Okay, I'm going to jump into a last last assignment type here. And this one was actually kind of brought up by Pete, who's in the chat right now, and really initially focused on our K-12 of what happens. And being a former teacher, I know this happened to me, when you get sick and you need to give an assignment and you want to do it quickly because you really don't feel good and you need somebody to be able to pick it up and run with it, using Packback for sub plans. Now, if you're in higher ed, you also get sick. You also sometimes have to pass off your class, or maybe you cancel class and say, "Hey, let's do it async. Let's do an assignment asynchronous. Do it during our class time. Check in with you later. But also, I'm going to go get in bed because I don't feel good, and everybody leave me in peace." So let's talk a little bit about what sub plans look like here, because I think this is a great spot where you can plan ahead, or you can also do it last minute. So, couple of ideas here. If you want to have that peer-to-peer interaction, you could have all the students watch a video, read something. Maybe they're reading a chapter in a book. Maybe they're reading something in their textbook, an article that you've printed out, whatever it is. Have them watch something or read something here. And then have them ask questions about what they're watching or what they're reading, and really dive into this idea of, hey, how does this relate to your own life? What was exciting to you about this? What questions do you have about this? This thing that we watched, this piece that we read. You can plan that at the start of the year. You could plan that right now and have it ready to go. And as soon as you're sick, turn it on. The thing that I will always say for any type of sub plans, whether in your higher ed or K-12, is this can't be your first time using Packback. Students will have to have accounts. Students will have to have logged in before. You're going to want them to have seen Packback before, because going into it cold would be a little hard. But if they've ever done it before, they should be able to do it again, as long as you have this already set up and ready to go. The second piece is, if you have somebody coming in your class, and again, this is for sub plans, but also think about if you have a speaker coming into your class and they just want to get to know the class a little, loosen things up, you could use a poll, put in some really easy, soft questions, or maybe make it a little bit broader, where they need to explain their thinking of, like, what do you do? What's your career choice? What are you thinking through? If I gave you these 8 options of career paths you could take, which one would you take? What has you excited to be at school today? What has you excited for this class today? Anything like that, putting that in is a really good icebreaker and way to get conversation going, or to make sure that people start to feel comfortable as they're jumping into the class. Last piece is using deep dives the same way that you would use questions, but in this, students are really just focusing on their own work. They're not having a peer-to-peer interaction. One thing that I love about doing it this way is also that you can hold students a little bit more accountable. So if this were to happen again, they know that you're going to look at their assignment and they're going to get a grade for it. You could even, if you're in higher ed, make extra credit of, hey, if you finish this at a high quality, I'm going to give you some extra credit. And I know K-12 you can do that as well. But I always would say here, give students some type of action first, a video to watch, an article to read, and then have them do any type of response or reflection. Awesome. Okay, I've gone through a lot of different assignments and talked through a lot of different things, and want to just leave it open here for a second of, if there's any other assignments I didn't talk through and you want me to kind of go over some best practices. I might not be able to pull up a sample community right away, but we could always follow up with one, or I can just talk through off the top of my head. Coming up with assignments on Packback is like my favorite thing to do, so happy to talk through any just kind of random assignments if there's anything I'm missing we didn't get to talk about. So, All right, I'm going to say that I did a wonderful, comprehensive job, and I went over every assignment anybody can think of. And I just saw your question right now: is Writing Lab available? It is about to be available in the next few weeks, so that'll be coming out in the next few weeks. Very, very, very excited about it, and I will kind of go. We can go through that. So excited! I will have lots of information come out when that's officially launched, but. We have it on our administration panel, so we get to play with it and practice and read through it. So very excited about that. All right. I will just, as I'm wrapping up here, I do want to say if there's an assignment I did not talk through, or you're like, ooh, this is a great start. It's got my juices flowing. I have lots of ideas here, but I just don't feel like I'm right over the edge. Like I want to just talk it out with somebody. Please connect with your experience manager or your curriculum consultant. We would love to connect with you and just help you think through what's the best way to get you over the finish line to make this work. How would we break it up? What's our recommendation? So definitely feel free to reach out to your experience manager, or we'll reach out to your experience manager on your behalf and let them know that you had questions and you want to meet with them to talk through this as well. All right. And then last piece before I completely wrap us up is just letting you know about our webinars. I did mention last week we did one on rubrics, so feel free to go to our webinar website and you can check that one out. This one is talking about Packback in any assignment. And then next week, creating a writing assignment in 15 minutes. You might think I'm insane by saying that, but we will be utilizing AI to help us write those assignments because we think that that's a tool that's really helpful. And how can we utilize it to make your life easier and also to help make assignments really, really strong for students without burning instructors out? Because I know that that is something that can be really hard when you're excited to do something, but just cannot work out all the details. So we'll be talking about using AI to help create those writing assignments in 15 minutes. And then we always have our monthly webinar, which is really our CEO, Kelsey, going through and exploring different new things going in AI. So, that is it. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks for, hopping on here. And like I said, feel free to reach out to your experience manager if you have any questions at all, or reach out to help@packback.co, and they'll put you in the right direction if they can't find you anywhere. So thank you so much, and I hope to talk to you soon.